Come on. You can do it. Hello and welcome to How to Tell Good Stories number 14. Today we are speaking with the creator of First Man comic, currently funding on Indiegogo in demand. Also, he is a longtime comic pro, crowdfunder, YouTuber, known around as an all-around nice guy. The guy who actually wrote the book on drawing dynamic comics. Just the astonishing one himself, Andy Smith.
Hello. How are you?
All right. I'm doing well. I think, people out there don't know, but I'm having computer issues from an update. So, which seems like that's always the thing,
problem.
isn't it?
You updated.
Yeah. Killing me. But so yeah, I've been looking forward to this because I've again, you wrote the book on drawing dynamic comics, like that was a while ago. And
22 years ago it came out.
Yeah, wow, was it that long? I remember, I think it was about 15 years ago was when I saw it in a comic book store and was like, hey, I think I'll check that out.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because I had done the traditional how to draw comics the Marvel way, but never finished it. And so I tend to not finish things for whatever reason. So I was like,
sounds like most artists I know. So
yeah. And then I sort of was like, you know what? I think I've maxed out on my art ability. Like I'd kind of got to a point, and then I was like, I don't seem like I'm advancing for the last year or two. So I kind of left it alone, and then did other things, and then I kind of came back to it and was like, I'll try again. Why not?
That's cool.
Because I had actually gotten an opportunity to ink for somebody for an indie comic book back in the early 2000s, and so I figured I would go read up on it. And so you're one of the few people too I've actually known about. I didn't really pay attention to artists and writers very much of comic books. I kind of just paid attention to eras. Like like I knew, comics were really great from like the Hulk was really great from like 85 to 88. And the Punisher was really good from like 87 to 90 and things like that,
that's weird. I guess I never really thought about it in terms of that of era. I always just pay attention to artists and stuff. Hold on. Let me just mute this.
Sure.
Luckily it already is, but I think I just always paid attention to the artists and stuff, which I guess makes sense since that's, what I got into.
Right.
But I mean, I can think of eras growing up of books that I really enjoyed, but in a whole, I don't go, oh yeah, that, in the 90s, this run or that run. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. And that's, I don't know. It's just probably the way I'm really bad with names. So that's probably what it is. Like, I think I honestly, the fact that I knew who like Chris Claremont was and George Perez, I think those are like the two names that I really knew because those are just such classic, like between the X-Men, which is what I grew up on mainly reading, and
Sure.
Wonder Woman. But anything DC in the mid '80s was, I mean, Perez. But yeah, so it's like, so I the first time I really paid attention to people like names was mid 2000s when I first started. I got back into drawing them. So like I said, it's crazy that it's been like 15 years ago. I was reading the book about how to draw dynamic comics, and then I'm like, yeah,
Sure.
man, I'm actually talking to you. So you've got your name on quite a few titles out there, and you've been around for a little bit. So
Yeah.
for someone, like before you even got into comics, like what was the thing that got you started? Like what was like, how was your beginnings in art or storytelling with
I
visuals?
mean, it it started with just drawing. I
Mhm,
always like to draw. I always tell people that I believe, um, oops, I believe that, every kid starts drawing. Every kid, you give them a crayon,
mhm,
they start drawing.
mhm,
But what I see is, and I saw this in my own daughter, is um, people like me. We don't stop. We don't move on to something else. We just keep drawing, even though
mhm,
other things might be introduced to us as you get older. Like, oh, video game, TV, whatever, reading, whatever. We're still just like, no, we just want to draw. We just want to take that blank piece of paper and fill it up. Whereas, my daughter liked to draw and she was 2, but then when as she got older and got other interests, she was like, she just kind of left it to the side, you know.
mhm.
So I always did that. And then I discovered, obviously I watched cartoons as a kid and stuff. And through that is how I discovered superheroes like Spider-Man and such. And then coming home from school one day, I stopped into a convenience store, 7-Eleven, walking from the bus stop to the house. And I saw this, Captain America 275 on the stands, and I was just blown away by the cover. And I picked it up and flipped through it. It was like, this is awesome. And back then comics were 60 cents, so I just slapped out a buck, had picked it up and took it home, and from there just it just kept going. I got other books. I found a comic shop in town, because that was right when comic shops were becoming their own thing. Until then, I would go to drugstores and stuff. I remember the comic book spin rack. I'd look through that, and I just I was already drawing, so I saw this stuff. It was like, well, somebody's got to do this, so I would just try drawing characters and stuff,
Yeah.
and always took art classes, and um, in high school, pretty much told my high school teacher, I want to go to the Kubert School, the Joe Kubert School, because I actually saw an ad for it
Mhm.
in, a Marvel or DC book, whichever they advertise. They still advertise in comics. So that was that.
Wow. Yeah, so that's you kind of like went directly at it. Like a lot of people tend to sort of fall into it. Like they start with art and then somewhere along the line somebody's like, "Hey, draw something." And they actually draw it and they're like, "Hey, maybe I'll go." But you kind of knew, like once you got into it, it was like it
Oh
came,
yeah,
right. That's
it was just the one thing. It's all I just ever wanted to do. There was nothing else I wanted to do. Guidance counselor. Oh, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to do this. Well, what if that doesn't work out? I said, well, I just want to do this.
yeah,
So I didn't have a backup. When I
right.
went to the Kubert School, I was really just like, this is it. I need to. It's a 3-year school, and in my third year, I need to work hard enough so in my third year I can put together a portfolio that'll get me work. So when I graduate, it's not that I couldn't get a job in comics, but I would have, if I didn't have a job in comics when I graduated, I would have moved back home and looked for any type of art job, and then just tried to keep working on samples, to get a job in comics.
Right.
at night and stuff. But I lucked out, and I got my first gig when I was in my senior year, the spring of my senior year at the Kubert School.
Hmm.
So
And what was that? Was the first thing?
it was a DC. It was an inventory job of an issue of Suicide Squad, and
Hmm.
they don't do those anymore. Not Suicide Squad, but inventory jobs.
Right.
Inventory jobs are jobs that basically they they give, basically people starting out,
Right.
and the deadline is usually longer. So, in fact, I remember the editor saying, "Oh, there's no deadline on it," but
Yeah.
you can't take that. Uh, you never want to go, "Oh, okay," and you know, take it for what it's worth, because, in my opinion, it's also kind of like a test. Like,
Mhm.
okay, here's a 22-page job. There's no deadline. And then you turn it in 3 months later, they might be like, well, that took a long time. And even if you say, well, you said there was no deadline, you know.
Yeah.
So I tried to do it within, I think, 5 weeks. And,
Okay.
so they'll have somebody do an inventory job back then. Basically, they can work with the person as they work on it. And once it's done, it goes into a drawer. And then if for some reason that book, whatever the job was for, mine was Suicide Squad, if the book is running late, this was before the internet and preview catalogs and all that stuff.
Hmm.
So if the book was running late, then instead of shipping late, they could just pull the inventory job, finish it up, and send that to the printer.
Right.
And apparently Suicide Squad never ran late. And I think it was canceled shortly thereafter too. So that job I did actually never saw print. So
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That's Yeah. It's always funny to me about that. How that you hear so many, especially back a while ago. Nowadays, I guess they just. I've literally heard stories of people saying that they just put some art on Tumblr and got a phone call from somebody saying, "Hey, we'd like you to draw or write something for Marvel." And it's like,
right,
really? Like just from Tumblr art? But I guess, back then it took, it was back a while ago. I mean, even this isn't like back then, even 15 years ago. It actually took something to get into it, into it because there was, I mean, let's face it, the big guys were always just packed with artists and packed with people who could do it.
right,
And unless you were one of the your art was just so spectacular that you couldn't be denied, which even then I guess sometimes they would deny people, but
oh yeah,
um it was, unless it was just so out there, you had to really just work, you had to work your way through it, and you had to be on time. It's that and the time thing is what's interesting, is because you'll hear stories about, like, I've read about, like, Liefeld and stuff, how that, like, the first three things he ever drew were like super early and then like never hit a deadline after that, like I guess that is what it is, but
I mean, it just depends on who you are. If you're somebody really high up there,
mhm,
they'll they would like it in a timely manner, but they'll let it slide a little bit.
mhm,
Um, but when you're first starting out, the deadline. I mean, this is how I was taught, at least with Joe Kubert, was the deadline's all important, all that matters. And when you're first starting out, if they say you got 4 weeks to do it, it's two things: the deadline and communication. So if they say you have
mhm,
4 weeks to do it, honestly, even if it's your first job, I think if you're honest as you're moving along, so let's say it's a 20-page job, they say you got 4 weeks, that's 5 pages a week. If at the end of week one, if you only have 3 pages done, maybe not panic, try to make it up the next week. But at the end of the second week, if you only have, say, 6 done, at that point, if you're not communicating with the editor, you should be. But if you're not, you should definitely contact the editor and just say, this is all I've got done. I'm really trying to do my best. Could we push the deadline a few days?
right,
But you don't wait until the day the book is due to do that.
right.
You know.
So
Um, oh man, I got to sneeze, so I'll let you ask your question.
no,
I'm
yeah,
going to mute.
Right. Yeah, I was just gonna ask. Is were you a type of guy that you could just do the monthly and you could hit it every time? You know.
Oh, I didn't hit it every time. I mean, I've worked on four, I think maybe five monthly books,
Yeah.
and three of those were, definitive monthlies, as in the first one was Quasar. That was an ongoing book.
Right.
I did 10 issues of it, and I think I had one fill-in issue. And,
Mm.
Fill-in is different from an inventory because they'll
Right.
plan it as in, all right, it looks like in a couple issues, Andy's going to need a break. Let's have the writer start working on whatever issue number that is. Let's get an artist on it.
Right.
So basically, people would see a fill-in issue and be like, "Oh, it must be nice you took a month off." And it's like, no, that's not what happened. What would happen is, let's say I did issue 1, 2, and 3, and then the fill-in issue was 4. I didn't take a month off. Just when I finished drawing 3, I started drawing 5
Right.
while the
Right.
artist was working on 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a fill-in issue on that. I did Exo Man of War for 10 or 11 issues.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I had a fill-in on that or not. I did the first at CrossGen for 10 or 11 issues as well, and there were a couple fill-ins on that, but those were always built in.
Mm.
And I'm trying to remember and then the other ones. Oh, I did Stormwatch for 6 issues, but that was pencils and inks.
Mm. Okay.
And I did 6 in a row. And I did Red Sonja Claw, which was 4 issues, but as soon as that was over, I rolled into a 6-issue Claw book. So that was basically 10 issues straight through just doing pencils.
Huh.
I'm sure there were times in any of those jobs where I said I need a couple extra days. But like I said, even from the beginning, I was always really cognizant of being, communicating with my editor.
Right.
That was another thing that was hammered in at the Kubert School is just talk to him. You can't go wrong if you're talking to him daily, and keeping them up to date on where you are compared to 4 weeks go by. And on the day before it's due, you're like, oh yeah, by the way, just want to let you know, I only have 2 pages done. So, and then what was, Earth 2 for DC was an example I was going to give you where I did issues 29 through 32. 32 was the last issue of the book. So, 28. What was it? Wait, 27, 28, 29, 30, 27. 27 through 32.
Uh-huh.
I knew it was 6 issues. And, they called me up. They said, we'd like you to draw this book, monthly. I was like, okay. I knew it was going to end with issue 32, even though I don't think that was announced yet. So I knew it was only 6 issues, but it was still 6 in a row.
Right.
And it already started late. Like when it was given to me, the book was already late. So in issue 27, I did the bulk of it. I want to say I did 14 out of the 20 pages. And then in issue 28, I think I did half. And in issue 30, I think it was broken up into 4 chapters. So I only drew one of the chapters. So I worked on every issue from 27 to 32. And I don't remember which issue number it was. Out of all 6 issues, I think I only drew the entirety of one issue because the book was already just late.
Right.
So, and they said, look, it's late. We'd like you to do it all. And I said, well, I really want to do it, but I can't do the whole thing because I want to do my best. I don't want to jam anything out. I want to do the best I can.
Right.
And they're like, all right, well, we'll just have to get other artists. I'm like, all right, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to sacrifice anything. So it's like, okay, you got to give pages away, give pages away.
Yeah, that's interesting because that was there's been a couple. There's been Marvel made a habit of that in 2018 of having quite a few comics where like they would have a couple double page spreads or a couple of splash pages that you could tell were drawn by somebody else
Right.
while the main artist, and that there seemed like there was a lot of them happened.
And see, they could have avoided some of this with going back and just doing the old inventory issue. I
Right.
still think they should do them, because if they would have had just one inventory issue sitting around that they could have said, you know what, instead of starting you at 27, we'll start you at 28. We'll put an inventory for 27.
Hmm.
That's a month of time it buys you.
Right.
And that's a lot, that month of time. I might have still needed some help, but not nearly as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
it's
there's,
just scheduling and management. And that's what, I've never worked at Marvel or DC in that capacity. I
mm,
have worked as like an art director and sort of editor when I was at CrossGen. Since we were all under one roof, I had other responsibilities, and that was one of them.
mhm,
So I had to talk to freelancers and stuff, but not anywhere on the scale of uh, DC and Marvel. But at some point, you just got to look at something consistently being late and go, either we just skip a month, which no company wants to do that because out of sight, out of mind,
right.
or you just go, okay, look, let's get somebody right now working on like 2 issues that we can slot in, instead of just putting this stuff out either with multiple artists or late.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely, organization is definitely one of those things that can make or break certain things. And
Mm-hmm.
especially, I mean, I always like to, uh, I've joked about it with different people of, especially with deadlines and stuff, unless it's a
Mm-hmm.
book that's just been going on for hundreds of issues. Everything is always being written for the trade now. So I
Right.
guess they don't want to have those extras issues that aren't going to make it in the trade for some reason.
Right. Oh yeah, I'm sure. But even still, they could still throw an inventory in a trade, because the thing is, it's just, sure, out of say 7 issues in a trade, one of them is an inventory, but you bookend it with it. You don't put it right in the middle. So I
Yeah.
mean, if everything, like you're saying, they know that they're writing for the trade. So, and I know there was a collection, a hardcover and a trade paperback of issues 27 through 32
Right.
of Earth 2 that I did. So, I mean, going by my scenario, like I said, if it's a throwaway book, an inventory that's just a one off, let's say it was, let's say 27, 28 came out and they're like, oh, it's running late. Throw that inventory in for 29. And then the story picks up in issue 30, 31, and 32,
Right.
33, whatever. Well, then when the trade comes out, you do 27 and that 6-issue arc in order. And then so you don't waste that single issue, you just throw that at the end or the beginning because it doesn't tie into anything.
Right.
So, because you can always reorganize a trade.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially, I mean, honestly, some of the best trades I've ever had. One of the best trades I ever had was um they did a Batman War Games. It was like 4, I think there
Yeah, I
was
think I know the one you're talking about.
and it was pretty crazy because the way they did it was like a big multi-gang war had broken out in Gotham, and it actually encompassed 5 different books, 5
Sure.
different series. But so the trades were set to where you would get like 1 issue from each of the series
Oh,
and like
right. Well,
2 from the main story. And it
I
was
mean, that's kind of
perfect,
how Nightfall was, I think.
right? It was just perfect the way that it told the story from all the different angles. And honestly, it wasn't as dry as some of the trades are today. It was so
Right.
the
Well, I
story
mean, like I said, that's how, well, even back when they were doing in the early 90s, they were doing Superman, Adventures of Superman, Action
Mhm.
Comics. I thought there were 4 of them because it came out weekly. I can't remember what the 4th one was, but I know there were 4 of them.
Right.
And so they would get readers to buy all 4 books,
Mhm.
issue, the first week of the month, Superman comes out, it's issue, 215, whatever. But in the corner, it has the Superman symbol, and instead of the S, it has a number. So it'll be like 1. And
Mhm.
then next week, Action Comics, whatever number, but it has that little Superman symbol with a 2. So to read these in order. So then when the trade came out, or the collection, It
Right.
wouldn't be 6 issues of Superman. It would be that story arc, which would consist of, Superman action adventure, and then start over again. Superman action adventure, whatever, you
Right.
know. And I mean, they did that with Spider-Man back then, with, Clone Saga, I believe, ran through a bunch of different issues of
Hmm.
Spider-Man and stuff. So,
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it changes the pacing of the trade a little bit. Like when you were to collect a story, it changes the pacing to where that it doesn't feel like it's all just one continuous long story. It's a
mhm.
bunch of stuff that happens, and um, so I'm gonna transition into that kind of idea of telling a story, developing a story. For you, like you've got a new IP coming up with Core Draft.
Mhm.
And do you start with the visuals? Do you start with just the idea? Do you start with the story and you say what fits this? How do you develop your story? How did you develop like an IP?
Core Draft's a little different because this one I'm working with a buddy of mine, Dennis, who we do a show, the Dennis and Andy Show, on Wednesdays on
Mm-hmm.
that YouTube channel. And I knew after First Man I wanted to do something different, and I wanted it to be in the barbarian type vein, because I spent 2 years on First Man, and before that it was just typical, I guess, superhero stuff, buildings and things like that. And the last time I drew barbarian type stuff was Claw, which was 10 years ago or more.
Mm,
So Dennis and I were actually driving to a convention because he lives here in town, and he's huge into D&D. He's a
right.
dungeon master. He's just huge into it. So I know he knows that world. And I said, I'm trying to think. I want to do something. And the only real springboard I had was I wanted to have, obviously the male hero, and I wanted him to have not a sidekick, but a companion or partner or whatever that was a female,
Mm,
you know.
right.
And other than that, I didn't really, we just started talking about different ideas uh, in the car ride. So that's how that came about. And it did. It starts with the characters. We came up with the characters. I came up with the two of Cordrath and Adriana. Those weren't their names then. They didn't have names. It was just, male barbarian and then, female sorceress type. And then, we had to come up with the bad guys, which are the Necronite, his not partner, but second in charge or whatever you want to call it, is Lilith. And then the big bad is Vordoom, the Undying. And then from there, I kind of just we kind of just batted back and forth a few ideas of what could kick off. What's the story about? What could kick it off? And it was the
Hmm.
whole devastation of Cordrath's tribe that he's from. And then from there, Dennis pretty much went and would write up notes, and I'd read them, and we talk back and forth. Now, when it comes to my stuff, like First Man, First Man was something that was really created, over 2 decades ago. And for me, it was just
Hmm.
kind of like, I knew I wanted to do a superhero thing. And it was just looking at the superhero stuff that's out that I enjoyed growing up. And one is Captain Marvel, or I should say, well, the original Captain Marvel, now Shazam. Because I always liked
Right.
the aspect of the young boy saying a magic word, turning into this alter ego hero. But I also
Hmm.
loved Captain Marvel that Jim Starlin did in the 70s with all the cosmic stuff in
Mm, right.
space.
Right.
And then this doesn't have to do with just comics, but movies, even books I like to read. I love stories that have comedy in it. Not that it has to be a comedy. I mean, I do like sitcoms and stuff like that and comedy movies, but even movies like say Die Hard, which is an action movie, but there's a hint of there's comedic stuff in it with the dialogue.
Right.
Lethal Weapons that way. things like that. So those were like the ingredients that I first thought I want to put together in this book. And First Man, I wanted to do, honestly, I designed him originally when I was in my teens. And a lot of the design sense I got back then was from one of my favorite artists, which is John Byrne. And I just love the way he designed costumes and stuff. And, I grew up in a time when most of the costumes were basically just, lines on a naked body that you drew.
Right.
No wrinkles and all that stuff. I grew up in reading comics in the late 70s, early 80s, and guys like Gil Kane and, like I said, John Byrne, George Perez, Jack Kirby, Neil Adams. I loved all that stuff.
Yeah. At best,
and that's basically what it was. It was like, you're just drawing a body without the bits and pieces, and you're just drawing lines over them for the costume. And that's what got me into comics. And so that's how I designed First Man. And then with the other two main characters, Monarch and Penumbra, I knew I wanted a bad guy that was just physically huge and posing bad guy. So that's Monarch. And then, to round it out, I wanted a female in the cast who wasn't totally like First Man is totally a hero. Monarch is totally an evil bad guy. And Penumbra is kind of like right in the middle. She's not totally a psychopath, but if she has to do bad things to suit her agenda, she will. But she's also not going to be like, oh, look, that person just just fell and they're going to fall to their death. Monarch would be like, she'd be like, yeah, I could do something about that. So, well, those were the pieces for that. And then it was just kind of formulating a story around it. And, I want to give credit to my buddy, Rob Snyder, who co-wrote it with me. And that was kind of that I would say, well, even with Dennis, it's kind of like the old Marvel style where Stan would talk to, say, John Romita in his office for a few hours about the story. And then John would just go and draw it. Whereas Rob and I would talk on the phone for a few hours about the story, but then he would still go and, type it up for me to work from.
Right. Yeah. So, so for you, like, obviously First Man are complete stories in each issue. And so when you sit down, I mean, do you have the book plotted out to where how many pages for everything and what you're doing, or do you have your goal in mind and you go ahead and you have your bullet points and you just start drawing? How do you start?
No, I even like I said, even with First Man and the same with Dennis, I'm like, I'd like a full script, and I've worked both. I've worked plot style, and plot style is where, Chris Claremont, for instance, when I worked with him, where he would just write out for each page a paragraph description. And it's up to me to take that and break it down into how many panels, the size of the panels and everything. Whereas a full script is, panel 1, description of what's happening, dialogue, panel 2, description of what's happening, dialogue.
Right.
But, I like working either way. So I kind of leave it up to, the writer. So Rob wrote full script for First Man, but even though he did that, going through the process, since I'm so connected to the book, being a co-creator of it, and even with other writers I worked with at Marvel and DC, every writer I've ever worked with was like, look, if you feel like you need to add a panel, go ahead. There's not many times where you take a panel out of a full script, but there have been numerous times where it's been like, this could use an extra panel on the page to break this up into 2 panels instead of 1, or break it up into even 3. So I would do that working on First Man. On First Man 2, when I got to the 3rd act, the last 20 pages, even though I read the whole script before I started drawing it, once I actually drew that first 2/3, when I got to the 3rd act, what was written just wasn't making sense to me. And And I remember, discussing it with Rob before he went through and wrote it all out like that. But once I drew that first 2/3 of the book and I actually got to that third act, it just wasn't making sense. So I called Rob up. I think we talked for about 2 hours on different ideas to redo the whole third act. And, once we were done, he went and wrote it up. And I had notes written up on my end that I was holding on to until I saw what he did, because I didn't want to influence him with my notes.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, let me see what he does. And then if what he does is like really, really cool, maybe my notes don't need to be used. Or if what he does is like almost there, then use my notes. And what he gave me back was all there. I was like, nope, he did better than what I wrote in my notes. And I think I still went in and maybe added a page or two to it anyhow, just to kind of extend stuff. And then with Cordrath, Dennis I think he's up to page 27 or 28 of the book now, writing wise. And I go through like every 10 pages. I did it with the first 10. I went through and I read it. And, we work on a shared document, and I just went through and made some notes and expanded things and stuff. And we talked about it, and he was like, sounds good. I'll, incorporate all that, stuff.
Right.
So, because I like to have that jumping board of seeing a script after I talk it over with somebody, and then I can read through what it is and break it down and extend things or maybe contract if it's possible. So,
okay. So, the only other question that we're gonna go on, because I don't want to keep you too long, is the next thing I'm just interested about is the idea of the panels and the breaking down of the pages and stuff. Especially like you said, like with a Chris Claremont, where based upon who was drawing his stuff, there was a lot of variety in how it showed up. Because obviously some guys it felt like it was all the splash pages, because if you can get it all in on one page,
Sure.
it, the more panels, the longer it takes to draw.
That's not necessarily always true, though.
Really? Well, it does for me.
Well, because it depends on what's in the panels. Because let's say it's a splash page of, Superman flying over Metropolis. Okay.
Right.
And the whole point is to show Metropolis, not, once again, there's numerous ways to do everything. But if it's supposed to be a nice shot of Metropolis and Superman, if you're really late on your deadline, you can get that done quick. But if you're not, it's going to take a while to draw, compared to, let's say, it's 6 panels and one panel Superman flying over Metropolis, and then it's like a close-up of Superman, a close, he's landing at the Daily Planet, walks inside of it. Because it's 6 panels, but because everything's different in all the panels, that could actually take, it's different for everybody, but I've drawn paneled pages faster than splash pages before.
Wow.
Because a splash page is one big image and it could have a lot of detail. Or an example is an issue of Quasar I did was also plot style. That's how Mark Grunwald wrote, was just paragraphs for each page. And, the fastest I ever drew one page was 20 minutes. Nope. 15 minutes. Wow. And it was a splash page of Quasar. And I'm pretty sure it was Quasar. It could have been a different book. But the point is, it was page 1. It was a shot of Earth.
Yeah.
So Earth and space, obviously. But it was specifically written, it was supposed to be far away.
Right.
So if you picture the full real estate of a splash page, and then Earth being like, I get my circle template out, and I use a circle that's like the size of old silver dollar coin, twice the size of a quarter, I guess, maybe 3 times the size of a quarter. So basically a 3-inch circle, diameter circle.
Right.
Boom. Draw that. Indicate a little bit of, what you could see of, the continents from that distance, which isn't much.
Right.
And then if it's a shot where the moon's not in the shot and the sun is, I'd use a really smaller circle to put in the distance for the sun. And then after that, it was pretty much just indicate the old way, because I wasn't inking the book, somebody else was. You would write BWS, which means black with stars. So the inker knows to fill in everything black and
Yeah.
then do a star field.
Right.
So, and I
Yeah.
think I might have done some other things in the background in space, like Kirby used to do, Crackle or whatever. So I
Right.
think that page took a whole, 15 minutes,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
I've actually been trying to work on my own drawing to get myself to tone down on the backgrounds, because I tend to I want a background for every panel. And I know, looking at old 90s stuff, there's entire issues drawn by some of these guys where you're like, hey, where are they exactly? Well, I don't know.
Right.
In comic land,
There's a rule, there's different rules of thumb. One is, I almost call it like John Byrne. And you know what? I say that, and this is from talking about eras like you were earlier. This goes back to the early 80s when he was doing Alpha Flight and I think Fantastic Four.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where I'm recalling this from. But my basic point is, one reason John could draw so many books a month, besides being fast, is he would do a thing where, let's say it was the Fantastic Four.
Mm-hmm.
And, on the page, you don't have to do the establishing shot in the first panel, but you want to have it somewhere on the page, obviously, so you know where the characters are.
Right.
John Byrne, one of the other recollections I have is, Kirby I would always think of as the 6-panel grid guy.
Mm-hmm.
Byrne I would think of as not necessarily grids, but 4 panels a page, maybe 6 at the most, but more like 4 or 5. So let's say it's a 4-panel page, and panel 1, he's establishing the Fantastic Four are hanging out in the lab. So he would draw the Fantastic Four in a medium long shot or a long shot in the lab in the background, all the detail.
Right.
The next 4 panels on the page, unless somebody was interacting with something in the lab where they were physically touching something or whatever, he might not even draw the background again.
Right.
And then you turn the page, and if they're in the lab still, he would reestablish the lab at some point on that page, and then maybe not draw it again. And I don't mind that, because once you establish a scene, if you want to draw the background in every panel, say like George Perez would do, or Brian Hitch is just known for, he always draws backgrounds in every panel. You can, but there is also a thing about storytelling and pacing and how fast you want the reader to read through a page,
right?
Because it's up to you as the artist to control the pacing and stuff. And part of that is backgrounds. If there's no backgrounds, you'll read through it faster. So if you want somebody to read through a scene rather quickly, then establish the background, never draw it again until you turn the page, because you always want to try to establish it on every page, and just do it that way. And then you're just forcing the reader to go through it faster. If you want to slow them down, draw a background in every scene.
Right.
Because there's more to look at, more for the eye to rest on and stuff.
Yeah.
So, that's why I love guys like Byrne and John Buscema and guys like that, because they knew when to leave them out and they knew when to draw them in.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I'm trying to train myself, because for reading it doesn't bother me and I understand what it's doing. But when I'm drawing it, it feels wrong to not draw the background. And so I'm having to actually literally consciously tell myself, it's okay. You just make an indication there's a corner in the top left, and just move on, and it's so for me, they're training myself to actually be okay with it. Because again, for some reason, when I draw, I feel like it has to have the space and the dimensions need to be there. And it's just always been my personal issue. And it's been one of the reasons why I'm slow as well. I'm very slow.
Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely slow. I mean, that's the thing with George Perez. I mean, that guy, he drew everything, and he was a monthly guy. I mean,
Right.
Brian Hitch is is pretty fast
Right.
for, and you look at what he puts into his work. So
Yeah. And
I slow down background. I like drawing backgrounds. I don't hate them or anything, but depending on what the backgrounds are, it can either slow me down or it might not at all. It just really depends on what they are.
right.
So
Yeah. And I kind of grew up, I guess, because I read a lot of old comics before I read a lot of new comics because I was really poor growing up. So the old stuff was, it was even when it was $1.25, it was easier to buy 3 comics for $1 or to, buy them for 15 cents out of the back of, out of the back of the store or out of the bin or whatever. And so I read a lot of old stuff, and the way they controlled pacing with panel size and everything is genius to me. I mean, it's really genius.
Oh yeah.
Today, that's a lost art. A lot of your artists today, just the panel size is kind of like, it has to do with what they're trying to show. It's not the control of your pacing at all. You can tell.
Right.
And so, yeah, the panel size is really something. And that's where I was heading with it, is that, for you, do you have like a beat pattern, or do you have a way that, like, in your mind that you want people to run through a page? Like, do you have a general, like, do you come up with that?
I mean, I try to go to every page with that thought. It's not something, I mean, that's the best answer, because I don't think I have like a system.
Right.
So unless I had a 3 or 4 page script in front of me to kind of explain it, the best I can say is that, yeah, when I start a book, or, when I look at a page, whether it's 4 panels, 5 or 6, I always look at it, give it read it through, see what the whole intent, I guess you could say, of the whole page is as a whole. And because there are times Kirby did 6-panel grids for expediency,
right. Right.
Same with Byrne doing standard grids. It's just faster.
Right.
But if there's and I'll do grids like that if there's a specific reason I want the page to almost be kind of in a way, a flat line. Because to me, if you do a page where all the panels are the same size, it's kind of just straight across, Whereas once you start varying the panels, you get the ups and downs. The downs are smaller panels than a big one, then maybe a bigger one than that, a little smaller, really small, whatever, But if they're all the same size, it's just kind of a hum, across. So, like I said, I got to read the page. And if for instance, there's like 6 panels on a page, and let's say 2 guys are fighting and it's a 6-panel page. If it's a type of fight where they're just going back and forth evenly, I might do a 6-panel grid because I want each character to be equal in that fight. Right. Whereas, in panel 1, if it's a panel where they're just kind of squaring off, and in panel 2, I make large and it's of one guy punching the other guy, well, that gives the guy doing the punching the power out of the whole page if that's the biggest panel.
Right.
But if I keep them all, and then the third panel is the guy punching back, and I do that panel just a tad bit smaller, but not as small as the first panel where they were facing off, that guy wins a little bit of power back. But, until I were to do a panel where he's punching and it's even larger than that second one, he's still kind of behind in the game. But if I do a 6-panel page where you start with them squaring up, and then 2, 3, 4, and 5 are just, punching back and forth, it's really more equal of like, wow, who's going to win this fight? And that's when, say that's like a page 5. Because the thing I like about crowdfunding is we don't do ads. I mean, we might do a 1-page ad for our own stuff at the end of the book, but there's no ads to break up the story. So that any major cliffhanger you want to have on the last panel of an odd number page, so you turn for the big reveal. So if that 6-panel fight page between the 2 people is all the same size and it's all equal, and you're like, man, who's going to win this fight? And let's say you turn the page, and one of the guys, it's a splash page, and he's just punching, blasting, kicking, whatever to that other guy. It's like, boom, big reveal. That's the guy who won the fight.
Right.
So that's, I try to think of that type of stuff when I look at a script. If it's two people at a quiet scene, in First Man Volume 2, there's two people just, it's a page of him and his dad, and they're just talking in the house. I still varied the panels. The first panel was smaller because it was just an establishing shot of the house, from outside. The second panel went inside the house, and I made that the biggest panel. It was an establishing shot, so the camera I did overhead looking down. There, Luke's at the kitchen table. His dad, I think, is standing, and they're just chatting. Then it goes to a close-up of his dad, and then from the close-up of his dad, it went to a panel of Luke in his bedroom, just kind of kicking back on his bed, reading through his text messages or whatever.
Right.
And, that was a different panel shape than the panel of the establishing shot in the house that was also large. I'd say they probably took up the same amount of space. They were just different shapes. Mm-hmm. So they were equal importance. One is, here's the establishing shot of him and his dad, in the house. We've never seen this part of the house. Nice big panel. It's just a close-up of his dad, smaller panel. And then another big shot because the scene changed. Luke's now in his bedroom, so show off set pieces in there and stuff. So they have kind of equal importance on the page.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome.
And it makes a boring page interesting. That was the point of the story.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, and that's the stuff that I'm trying to get out for people who are watching or might watch in the future who want to learn something, is that is how to take something that is you need it there for story purposes, but how do you make it not seem like, okay, this is a couple of pages that are just boring or drab, but also just even going along the lines of how you're talking about varying sizes. I actually had just done that with I'm working on a book, and the one page is a fight that takes place, and I purposely did it to where there's 3 small panels in a row. The guy kind of smiling, the picture like a fist with nothingness behind it, and then the same exact background. I literally just statted the background over, and the guy falling backwards, like with a shocked look on his face. And then the next panel is a full width panel that shows him throwing a punch back, and the other guy because the idea in this is that the main guy is he's like a massive bear of a man, like 6'6", 230 pound, just monster. And so his punch does a lot more than what the other punch is. A little punch. Sure. His punch is a much bigger punch. So, that's awesome stuff like that, and the thing is you've already said 3 things that honestly you said them as though they're obvious. I've spoken to people just in the past few weeks and month that those aren't obvious. When I explained to them about making sure that you run up to the page turn and make sure your odd page is leading up, but your big
even with my buddy Rob that I did First Man with, in the second one, there were a few instances, and this is after, once again, I didn't even catch this until I started drawing the stuff. Because I always read a script through 1 or 2 times before I start drawing. And I remember, I think it was maybe 2 times, I was drawing something and I was like, holy crap, he's got a reveal on the odd number page. Right. And I would email him or call him up and go, we need to add a page somewhere so the reveal is on a even number, because I can't, it's not a reveal, because as soon as somebody turns the page, they're going to read the even number before the odd, but their eyes are going to see them both.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely.
He was just like, man, I'm just not used to, because most guys, most writers don't, most writers think, well, there's probably an ad somewhere. You really have to turn that part of your brain off going, no, there's no ads.
Right.
So it's always, odd number, big cliffhanger. I mean, you're supposed to have a mini cliffhanger or a little cliffhanger at the bottom of every page for that whole, you want them to turn the page. And that's fine, but you want to save the big ones for page turns, not just going up to the net. Like you could do a cliffhanger at the bottom of the page, which isn't visual. It's in the dialogue.
Right.
Because when you turn, your eyes will definitely see the 2 pages, but they're not going to read everything. So you can start reading it, get to the bottom of page 4, and the dialogue could be, it's because you're like, I'm what? Read up to the next first panel on the odd number page.
Right.
Gonna die, or whatever. You're like, oh, and that's a cliff. That's a reveal, but it's a reveal in text, not necessarily a visual thing that's going to be given away. So
right. Yeah, and I've actually even done almost like a reverse reveal in the sense of the big splashy thing is actually on the odd number page after the turn, but it's because I want you to see it and kind of go, what's that?
Right, and that's the other thing too is you have to. That's a whole thing when it comes to writing is thinking about that stuff, because you might want somebody to see it first. I mean, that's the control you have as the artist. So
Right. And again, those are just things that those don't always come natural to people. So that's why it's good to hear you say it, is because I'm sure somebody had never thought of that before. And so with you saying it, that's somebody's first time ever. And they will get that light bulb in their head will come off, will go on, and they'll say, and they'll become a better storyteller because of that. And they don't have to be an artist. They just, again, from the writer's perspective, they can become a better storyteller just knowing something as simple as that. And so that's awesome. Those are the type of things that I look for in this. That's is those little nuggets of just, and honestly, they're not secret. It's just something that you don't learn until you do it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this is just learning through doing it. I think the page turn thing, obviously that's something you learn in school, leading the eye through the page, the Z is something you learn in school, which that's just another lost art. I feel when I look at newer guys and stuff, is it's like, where's the leading the eye through the page? Like so many copies I see these days, it's just like, yeah, I get it. I read top, left, right, top, bottom, but as the artist, it's a subconscious thing. If you can compose every panel to lead to the next panel, so on and so forth.
Right.
It just helps the flow and helps, the reader, I think on a subconscious level, have a more enjoyable reading experience as they're, going through the book.
Right.
If the artist takes that into account when they're designing their page.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so I'm going to try and see if this computer's going to like blow up on me or not. And if I can share the sign up for.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I can share some art too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you can talk to us a little bit about, maybe I can't.
Well, if you can't share it, just post the link in the comments.
Hold on a second.
Whoa.
Nope, that's not good. Yeah, this thing is.
Is the web page not working? Or nothing? Uh-oh.
Yeah, that update, like, it went crazy, man. Like,
well, can you share my screen or no?
Yeah, I'll share your screen.
I would, once we're done, just go back to the YouTube, and in the description, just pop in the link if you can.
Yeah, I have the link in the description currently. And
okay. So yeah, if the link is in the description, then just click on that. And then if you can share my screen, we can just go through some stuff. And
absolutely.
So obviously, Cordrath, The Reckoning. This is the logo. My buddy Steve Dutro, who I went to the Kubert School with, designed. He's a letterer, of course, been doing it for 31 years. And I've had him design multiple logos for me. He's great. He did First Man. He did Jungle Lords. I think I actually did Ultra, but I know he did Jungle Lords. But there's that. This is the character lineup of the main characters in the book. Cordrath himself, Adriana, his companion / lover, Necronite, the bad guy, Lilith, his second in charge, and Vordoom, the Undying. And those are all drawn in proportion to each other. So he's huge.
Yeah, you and your big guys, man.
That's right, dude. That's why I got into comics, to draw big dudes and hot chicks. That's what I tell people. So I've been saying that since I was 15 or 16. Why do you want to draw comics? I want to draw big guys and hot chicks.
Yep.
So there's the cover, which Dan Lawless is coloring. So once I get the colors to this, I'll be able to show it off. Well, actually, I need to pull that into this folder. This is the Necronite and his horse, his little horsey that he rides around on.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, yeah, that's that. Let me hold on. I did finish yesterday this wraparound cover that I got to get colored still too, but that's going to be a variant cover with no logo, and it's a wraparound, so obviously it'll have a spine to it and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, so that's the wraparound cover for it, and no logo on it. So that is that. So yeah, go sign up now. Okay. I would appreciate it if everybody would go and sign up for Cordrath. Free trading card to everybody that signs up.
Right. And we know that, and the link is in the description, and we know that Andy fulfills, man, because he's got two of them out. All of them have, been out there, and as far as I can tell, they've been a little bit ahead of time, because I wasn't expecting sometime. The one, was it this last one? You were like, I'm in fulfillment, and I was like, what?
Well, this last one was right on time. It was May. I said it would be May, and I got to be honest, even in January, I was like, oh, it might be April. I wasn't telling anybody that. I was just telling myself, like, oh, crap, it might be April. I said May. Or no, it might not be. It might be June. That's right. I was thinking, oh, my God, it might be June. Damn it, I said May. It might be June. And lo and behold, nose to the grindstone, I got it all out in May. So,
well, I mean, in being as nice as you can about it with some of the crowdfunding, let's face it, if you said May and you got it out by August, that would be early. So,
oh no, I think everybody has life, is what I like to say. Everybody has life going on. You either have unforeseen things happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were unforeseen things happen to me during my campaign. I just guess I budgeted it out good enough, time wise. Right. But I think most people once again, I think it comes down to communication. Right. If you just drop off the face of the earth, that's bad. Mm-hmm. But if you communicate with updates, look, there's a campaign I backed. I won't mention it. It's not somebody I do streaming with. So if anybody's like, oh, I know who it is, you're not, because I've never done a stream with this person. But it was supposed to come out in 2020, I think in October. I just got an update this week. Hopefully it'll be this year. Whatever. You know, I know everybody's different when it comes to backing stuff. I back a lot of stuff, but I basically back it and forget about it. Right. I had a book show up. Jawbreakers Grand Bazaar just showed up on Saturday. I went back to my list of stuff I backed, and I backed that in May of 2020.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just got it, 2 years and 2 months later. And I was like, oh, sweet. I totally forgot I backed it. I just back it and forget about it. Because as a creator, I guess it's just, I have faith in my fellow creators that the stuff is going to come out. And when it does, I'll enjoy it. Now, would we like it all to be on time? Of course, but stuff happens. So,
yeah. And with the crowdfunding, I do personally see it as sort of like angel investing, where it's the idea is that there's a chance you're not going to get anything from it. There's always that chance, because a lot of these guys are not, even some that are actual, they've worked for DC in the past or something, done a few this and that. They've never been a consistent artist, but now they're trying to do their own book. It's an investment. You're going to put some money in. If they can get it all together, then they'll get you a book. If they can't, then, well, guess what? That's why the Indiegogo terms say that you're not buying a book, you're investing. You're putting money towards, because sometimes just doesn't happen. And it's like, so I understand. There's actually,
well,
I've been investing for a long time in these, and there's about 7 books that the one is over 9 years late that I.
Is it really?
Yeah, there's a book that I backed in 2012 that still hasn't come out. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I backed the book on Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been 5 years now.
Yeah.
And it was just a 22-page book. So we're not talking the big oversized stuff most of us do. Just 22-page floppy, right? Pay $10 for it, which, I don't mind doing that, because I think when you're doing crowdfunded stuff, I said it like this on Monday night. Ethan and Billy and I did a started at 9:30 King show. And I said, Marvel and DC and most floppies that come out, it's like McDonald's. It's like Burger King. You're going in there, I want that hamburger. I don't care that it's only $1.50. It's going to fill me up. It's good enough.
Right.
But when you back a crowdfunded project by one of us, it's like a high-class restaurant, from the standpoint of that burger is going to cost you not $1.50. It's going to be $15-$20.
Right.
You're going to get a side dish with it. And every book you get from us comes with extras, the stretch goals, the sides.
Right.
And you get that personal touch. I mean, we're not working with, yes, we're all working with like letterers and a colorist and stuff like that. But, first and foremost, I'm the guy. I'm the owner of the company. I'm the editor. I'm the artist, creative director. And, we care a hell of a lot more about this than the other stuff we did for the mainstream. Now, at the time when we were I can speak for myself. When I was working for the mainstream, I always put in 110%, because ever since going to the Kubert school, even in first year, you're taught you're only as good as your last job. And that's why I learned early on in drawing comics, don't do a job in 2 weeks that would normally take you 4.
Right.
Because the editor might be like, yay, you saved my butt. But when the book comes out, fans will see it and be like, well, this is odd.
Yeah.
And other editors don't know you did it in 2 weeks. I mean, if it's for the same company, you'll hope that editor would spread the word and say, hey, this guy just bailed me out. He did this gig in 2 weeks. Trust me, if you give him a full 4 to 5, he'll knock your socks off. That's what you would like to think happens. But I don't think it does. And then definitely the people across the street at another company will see it, and they won't know you did it in 2 weeks. They'll just be like, ew.
Yeah.
So the thing is, every book I did, I always did 110%, but there's added pressure when it's yours, because you don't have the big Marvel or DC behind you, not in the standpoint of support, but in the standpoint of, well, it's a Superman book. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where people just go, well, it's a Superman book. Superman. Everybody knows Superman.
Right.
Oh, it's First Man. Who's that? Well, you better make sure it kicks ass, so they want to know who it is and look at it and stuff.
Right.
So
yeah, and it's like that's a thing to take in life in general, is that I forget who said it first, but my grandfather told me it like 25 years ago, and that was, everyone is only remembered by their last worst thing that they've done.
Right.
He's remembered by the last worst thing you've done. And so try to make that worst thing be as good as possible.
Right. Exactly. It's true. You could live a stellar life. Everybody's like, oh, this person's great. whatever, right?
Yeah.
And in your last, the last thing you do, you lose your crap or something, and you're out in public and you just do something so awful, embarrassing, whatever it is. And then, you go home and you're like, oh, I got to make up for that tomorrow. And you die in your sleep. Right. And then it's like, yeah, he just passed away. That dick, did you see what he did last night?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good riddance.
That's
and it's like, no.
The old Norm Macdonald joke where he talked about how the guy took him around and showed him how that he built this barn and he built that and he built this and all the different things. He goes, and nobody's ever said that's the man who was the dairy farmer. That's the man who built his house with his own hands. He goes, but you sleep with one goat. And suddenly.
That's right. That's the guy that banged a goat.
Right.
So exactly.
So, yeah, absolutely. But so okay, man. Thank you so much for this. It's been awesome talking to you. It's been taking the time for to help out a smaller YouTube creator.
Yeah, man.
And, get out there. And I wish this is actually my third, well, technically my fourth channel. And I wish one of my other ones that had a lot more that got taken away I still had it, because that would have been nice to be able to have a big crowd. But I'm hiding from YouTube's analytics right now, trying to if I even say the name, they'll get me. I think I got banned from the platform. So
okay, you can tell me when we're done.
Yeah. But so thank you so much. Like I said, I'm just trying to, my big thing right now is the art. Is the storytelling. Is you can tell stories through art. There's actually your boy Zach made a good point a while back where he said, somebody asked him, you say certain art is good and certain art is bad, but they couldn't tell the difference. Mm-hmm. And he said, the difference is this. And he showed up an image from a G.I. Joe from 1988 or something. Mm-hmm. And it was a panel and the guy's grabbing a door, a vault door to pull it. And he goes, you see that right there? He goes, that looks like there's weight in that door. You're looking at something that's drawn. It's a flat image, but it looks like there's weight. Because that's telling a good story with visuals. Right. And I'm like, that's true. I mean, using just visuals, there's nothing on there to tell you that that's a heavy door, that's a thing. But just looking at it, it's telling the story. Right. With just pure visuals. And right now, I think with indie comics having another boom, we need more knowledge out there about how to tell a good story, whether it's through visuals, through the actual storytelling process. But we need a lot more storytelling. We have tons of great artists, tons of great art, but we need great storytelling too. Right. Because that's the future. And that's, let's face it. Sadly, I don't think Marvel or DC are going to go back to the way they were 30 years ago. So the future is going to be what you guys are doing here between Twitter and Indiegogo. So sure. Let's hope that the future is bright, because it looks like it right now.
I hear you.
All right. With that, I'm going to do my little outro, and I would like to thank everybody who is watching, whether this is now or in the future. If the sign up is still around, look in the description for the sign up link, and you'll be able to see it. Click it, sign up to get notified when Cordrath comes live. Again, Andy Smith always delivers. That's something he does. He's fast. He's on time. Good art. I mean, again, he wrote the book on it, so he knows what he's doing. And I just would want to encourage everyone out there, whether you're an artist, whether you're a writer, whether you've done it for 100 years or this is the first time you've ever thought about doing it, just write something. Don't worry about making money. Don't worry about, is it good? Write, draw, do it. Because a million ideas get lost every day because people don't just do it. They don't just sit down and do it. So if you've got the idea, if you've got the passion, sit down and write it. I mean, First Man has been around for 20 years before it got itself released on Indiegogo. So if it took 20 years for a comic pro to get his book out there, before it came full round. And of course, he's doing other things, but it took a while for that. It might take a while for you. So don't give up. Keep doing it. Keep writing, keep drawing, keep doing your art, keep doing your craft, because you never know. You might be the next, Buscema or something. And that's the wrong one. Nobody's going to be the next Buscema, but you might be the next guy. You might be the one. And so I just encourage everybody, stay creative, learn from the people around you. There's a whole plethora of stuff out there on the internet to learn from. And if nothing else, just keep going. Just keep going forwards and do your thing and tell your story. All right. With that, I am the Christian Nomad. I would like to thank you for watching. And as always, I end it by telling you do all the YouTube stuff, which is liking, sharing, doing all subscribing. If you hated it, if you say that I suck, that's fine. Tell me about it in the comments. Make sure the comment is really mean. Don't use any 4-letter words, because that probably will get banned or something. So watch out. YouTube is like that. But if it's mean enough, I will pin your comment so that people see it first, so that they know exactly how much I suck. But with that, thank you. Have a good day.